Gloria Chou, I would love for you to kick us off with your woman-owned story.
Oof. Okay, so if anyone has ever thought about a drastic career change, this episode is for you. I actually started my career off as a US diplomat. I had a pension, I had all the cushy life. I had 25 years ahead of me, and I decided to leave after one tour. And this not very common, but I was deeply unhappy as a bureaucrat. I knew I was meant for something creative, and I had just honestly chosen the wrong career path. It wasn't that it wasn't meaningful, it just wasn't for me. And I always just wanted to work in communications. I love film, I loved writing, and I wanted to work in corporate communications. And I probably applied for over 1,000 jobs. I kid you not, Eleanor, like 1,000. I have the LinkedIn receipts to prove it. And I was desperate to get a job in corporate communications, and nobody would hire me because they wanted very traditional cookie cutter PR agency experience. And I wanted to work in PR specifically because I was always the person that was like hyping my friends up, making connections. And so that seemed very natural for me to work in PR. And I faced, there was no opportunity for me. So I took the only job that I could in PR, which was a friend of mine who was taking a sabbatical from being a diplomat said, I'm working with a tiny fintech startup using AI stuff. I had no idea what any of that meant. I studied political science. And he's like, we'll pay you a couple $100 only if you can get us on TV. So first of all, no PR person would ever do that. No PR, but I had to just start from the bottom. And so I was like, remember, I never worked a day in my life at a PR agency. So it wasn't like I could call up my friend at the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. I had to literally put in the Google search bar, New York Times newsroom, and I had to dial the operator with sweaty, shaking hands to convince the operator to stay on the phone with me to then transfer me to the intern, then the associate producer, then the producer. And so I probably did this at first. It was not the funnest part of my career, I would say. I did this thousands of times. And so when it was cold pitching. It was throwing spaghetti at the wall. I didn't have anyone to contact. I didn't have the relationships, and it was pure cold pitching. I started to pick up on patterns on when the journalists would give me the time of day and when they would just hang up on me. And now I turned this method, this cold pitching method called my CPR pitching method, credibility, point of view, and relevance. Now it's really the foundation of everything that I do. I turned it into a masterclass. We've made over 7 figures in that masterclass. I've done this masterclass, and now I teach entrepreneurs all around the world how to cold pitch. And
So, cold pitching often has such a bad reputation, whether it's cold calling or cold pitching. But, most of my colleagues who are sales pros are like, this is virgin territory, y'all. Like, cold pitching and really understanding how to do it effectively and how to do it well is so effective because it's kind of like a speed to conversion thing. Like, if you can
mhm.
go from somebody who doesn't know you, but be able to get them to collaborate or connect with you in some way, get them to kind of pick up an answer kind of thing. It's a really, really powerful, lucrative skill. So I'm so pumped that we're talking about this. And in the green room, Gloria and I were talking about what we were going to focus on, like the specific case study we could focus on. And as with many entrepreneurs, there's so many different things that you've done to become successful. But we were like, okay, we're going to really focus on this sort of masterclass and specifically how you used your own medicine, CPR, credibility, point of view, and relevance to actually get in front of other people's audiences, and not just any old audiences, but like really high value audiences to build your business. So we're going to go back to the beginning. So it's 2020. You've just lost $60,000 worth of contracts because people are not interested in PR during COVID. And I remember that period, just everything shuts down. You're probably seeing the cash drain out of your business. You have to do something. And my sense from, the research so far is that this is where this sort of masterclass idea was born.
Yeah, I want to talk about leveraging people's audiences, right? Masterclass is one of them. But everything I've done, when I think about the common thread, what is PR? It's leveraging the media. What is a masterclass? It's leveraging someone's audience. What is a podcast? So I want us to think smarter and work smarter, not harder. And I think your audience knows that if I can leverage my time and get 3, 4, 5 times ROI, that's always going to be a better decision. So masterclass is a way to do that. I want to stop and say there's a difference between a masterclass and a glorified sales webinar. And we've all seen way too many of those. And so I'm not talking about a 30, 40, 50-minute thing where you're just leading someone to a sale. You don't really show much, and it's just trying to manipulate them to buy. That is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about an actual masterclass where you are not just telling, but showing them your methods, something that is going to get them actionable results to the point where in my masterclass, I actually show a screenshot of a pitch that got someone featured 12 times. So from the subject line all the way down to the closing sentence. That's the type of substance I'm talking about in a masterclass. And I think we're getting to a point where people are so over these sales pitches that like your masterclass needs to be very juicy. It needs to be very good. And it's going to show value. It's going to put you as someone who is a thought leader.
One of the things that COVID did was that it created at first a big glut of like people producing content.
Hmm.
And it and that, you know, as you increase supply, um, relative demand goes down, and the bar, you know, in terms of what people expect really goes up. So I think to your point, what it used to take to be successful with a masterclass in 2019 is a far cry from what it takes to be successful today. Buyers are more sophisticated. Like you really do have to deliver some goods ahead of time. So assuming that, you know, our audience is going to do that, let's like walk us through, because you can have the best kind of class in the world, but if you can't actually convince somebody to let you share it with their audience, you're going to have a really small pool of people to talk to. So, walk us through like, how did you start? Now you're not pitching to get your clients on media, you're pitching to get yourself in front of other people's audiences. So, kind of walk us through one of the first times that you did that, you know, post COVID to really start, you know, rebuilding the business, or, you know, not necessarily rebuilding the business, but really generating some momentum,
Yeah.
adding a ton of value, and so on.
Yeah, and even if you're not productizing your offers like me, I have a
Yeah.
digital program. Even if you're still, trading time for money, you still need an audience, right? So how do you do that? How do you
Yeah.
not just one to one, but like how do you leverage someone's audience, whether it's a podcast, whether it's masterclass, that you can get those email signups? And so I realized that the first step is a lot of people get this wrong and they say, well, I need to just start speaking more. Well, it's like, okay, well, that's great. But they're always thinking about, here's what I want to talk about, my life story, this is what happened. And that's of no value to that person. And so what I want you to think about is what are the 3 or 4 buckets of audiences you can talk to, and be very specific. It could be freelancers in jewelry. It could be people in media, like whatever those are. And then write a pitch using the CPR method that's specific for that audience. So don't use the same spiel you would for all 5 or 4 different audiences. The first place I first started speaking to was I Fund Women, a platform mainly for female founders of color. During COVID, they were very active. They have a Slack Facebook group. And I knew that that was a great place for me, not only because of the audience fit, but because of the fact that they had omni-channel presence. So they had an email list, they had Instagram, they had Slack, and they also hosted these workshops quite frequently.
So I'm
And
just going to pause you there.
mhm,
Yeah, because there's a lot of gold in what you just shared. So it's like choosing specifically. So when you were thinking about choosing, like, how did you come up with your criteria for where would be a great audience for you?
I think there's 2 things. I think there's one, there's identity, and the other
Mm.
one is the niche problem that you're solving. So for me, as a woman of color, I really identified with their mission, right? Because they're a crowdfunding platform trying to get women of color businesses funded. And so from a identity point of view, I'm a first generation daughter of a Chinese immigrant. That really resonates with me. Another thing was that they were mainly solopreneurs who didn't have the budget to hire a PR agency. And so that quite uniquely fit what I was offering, because I'm really the solution for bootstrapping entrepreneurs who can't hire an agency. And so there's this whole unmet need of bootstrapping entrepreneurs, jewelry makers, Etsy founders, solopreneurs who just honestly had no idea how to do PR because the PR agencies were just not serving them. And so it fit those 2 criteria. And so that's why it worked really well for me.
And then you also mentioned something about it was also appealing because they had a multi-channel presence. Can you speak
Hmm.
to that also? Because that's very astute, I
Yeah,
think.
so they actually found me or something, and I started to dig into what they were doing. And they were very active during COVID with funding, with grants, and really trying to get financial relief for a lot of the businesses that were impacted. And so, they had a Slack channel that then I logged into, and there was like thousands of women on there, all different types of channels, ask for help, collabs, speaking, PR. PR was actually one of them. And I thought, well, this is really interesting because PR is actually a channel and people all day were asking questions. How can I get PR for my business? And there wasn't really a solution. And so that's when I thought, well, this is very interesting. This is a channel that people are actively looking for solutions, and no one has really given them a solution other than, well, you can pay for my services. And so if you're going to go into a platform, if I were to approach Karen Khan, who's the founder of I Find Women, and be like, hey, people are looking for PR services. I want to talk about my agency. She's probably going to say no. But if I said, I have a solution, we're using a three-step method, your people can actually start to plant the seeds and start to get PR for themselves, even if they have no budget, she's going to say yes. And so I think it's really important as you're talking about your masterclass is like, what is the specific solution that you are providing and what are you calling out? What I mean is my whole thing is how to get featured in the media without paying for ads or agencies. So you see how that's a very specific thing that I put at the bottom. It's not just how to get PR. And so because I said that you're not going to pay for ads, you don't need to know anyone and have zero connections, all of a sudden that painted a very specific solution that I could offer. So think about in
And
your
what I love
masterclass.
about that too, it's like it also, and I think this is the part that people don't pay enough attention to. It's like, is there, what are you calling out? Like, what is the actual hook, the why? And is there, because embedded in what you're saying, there's this sense of urgency and the sense of, oh, well, if I don't have to have a budget, I don't have to be able to afford an audience, I could probably get cracking on this today, so
Hmm.
that's actually like an internal motivation, that is going to be very, that's going to enable those entrepreneurs to do something and to take action quickly based on the teaching. And I think that when people can see that, it's so powerful, so smart, so smart.
Yeah, because most of the times PR is like, well, you got to pay someone who knows somebody. And I'm really disrupting that status quo because I'm like, well, actually you don't. But,
Yeah.
I'll give you another counter example. I've also done lots of speaking with startup accelerators. And they probably don't want to take their PR in-house because they have funding and it's a race to get the most things done. So I'm not going to pitch them how to get featured without ads or agencies. So I will pitch them how to get PR for your launch announcement so that you can attract more investors. So you need to be able to pivot your message for whoever it is that you're speaking to.
Brilliant. Okay, so so let's go back to this I Fund Women example because it's such a beautiful example. So you get connected with this organization, you get to know them a little bit, you start to see, to identify who are their members, what would their needs be. There's sort of this shared vision there, between the two organizations, which makes it, there's a lot of resonance. So how do you actually pitch your masterclass? Like, what did you actually, so we've talked about like what you did, but how did you do it? Because I think this is where people get stuck. They're like, who would I actually pitch this to? How would I go about even doing this?
Well, it's usually going to be the programming person, but before you start pitching, I would be active in like engaging with them and being a person of value. There's a lot of people that come in really hot to a community and start pitching their services right away. And all of a sudden it makes people feel like, oof, I need to just like create some distance. But I didn't do that. I wasn't like, hey, I have this PR service. You guys should buy it. It was like, oh, like here's a PR opportunity for you today. Like giving some tips and resources first. And then I messaged, I think it was on LinkedIn, and then I followed up with an email. And I was like, hey, it's COVID. And I know that a lot of people are still launching, but because they can't do media events and the traditional ways of media are no longer, I would love to be able to help your audience to figure out how they can still get some media attention around their launch, about their products, around their services, even if they have no budget, even if they don't have any PR agency experience. Which is really my story too, which is the story of the underdog, very much aligned with them. And so that was something that was relevant, right? Because I talked about what happened during COVID, that you couldn't really do these kind of media mixers, and the solution that I provided. So and then I talked a little bit about my credibility. So that's really the CPR method, the credibility, point of
Mm.
view, and relevance. Credibility was that, I have done this in the past. This is my masterclass. Obviously, your credibility builds as you go along. So I would say less credibility then, but we all have some sort of credibility. It could be some results that you've done. Now I've been on over 100 podcasts. Back then, not, but just a little bit about credibility. And the point of view is like, what are the 3 or 4 like bullet point things that you can help them with if they attend the class, right? So my pitch was I actually started off with the relevance, which is our for Relevance, which is during COVID, people are still needing to launch, they still need eyeballs, but they can't take the traditional routes of media. So I would love to present a masterclass that shows your founders exactly how to, one, get the attention of journalists, even if they know them, don't know them. Two, find out the right way to angle their story that gets media buy-in. Three, how to follow up with journalists in a way that is not off-putting. And four, figure out how to maximize on the PR opportunity. So point of view is usually bullet points, and then you conclude with one or two sentences of credibility. And that's really the CPR pitch in a nutshell.
And so it was, so basically the to make sure people are sort of keeping along. So you become a part of this community, you spend some time adding value, getting to know people, just contributing and investing into these relationships, getting to know people. And then you reach out to like the programming director and you're figuring that out through some of the research and just getting to know the community. You're reaching out to this person on LinkedIn, following up with an email, and presenting a pitch kind of like what you've laid out here.
Mm-hmm.
So then my next question is, when you did the master class, because a lot of people have questions about this, how does that actually work? Like, how do you build your list? Is it that do you both, who is in charge of promoting it? How do you get opt-ins from it? Like, how did that work for you? What have you learned? And specifically, what did you do in this case to help you grow your audience through the delivery of this masterclass?
So obviously, when you first start, they don't know how valuable and juicy the masterclass is. And so it's really on you to make it as valuable as possible. I will be providing worksheets. I will be like whatever it is to make it so valuable for them. And once they say yes, you can start chatting as equal friends or equal partners. You can start saying things like, do you know how many people will attend and will there be a recording? Usually for these master classes, I like to have around 50 or so people. I'll give you an example, right? I also can give you super simple copy and paste copy, like words, that you can write a follow up to your list so that they can watch the recording and then get the worksheet. I'm also happy to promote it on my social media and also tag you as a collaborator. So those things ensure that people show up, that they're excited, and that there's some follow up afterwards. And usually the follow up will have the copy and paste blurb that you give them will have a link to take the next step, some sort of opt in. It could be your
And did
Instagram,
you,
but even better if it's like if you want to take the next step, here is another pitching resource. And
yeah.
so all those things from beginning to end, you are kind of wrapping it up in a nice little ribbon. You get people to attend, you're sharing it on Instagram, you're leveraging their audience, you're on their email list, and so they're sending an email for free for you, but to help their audience, it all has to be about how it helps their audience, right? Help them
Yeah.
take the next step, give them an extra bonus worksheet. So the more that you can do that, the better, the easier they will say, yes, for sure, we will do all of that. You're not doing a paid sponsorship in their post. It's just the natural progression of this kind of engagement that you're doing with them.
Yeah, very smart. I think this is a great idea for a number of reasons. So, of course, you're able to build relationships with very cool people. You're able to demonstrate that you're valuable and useful by being valuable and useful. But there's also something very powerful about the power of brand association. So, like aligning Gloria Chou PR with I Fund Women. And that's what happens when you have these sorts of collaborations and masterclass opportunities. You actually leveraging the power of brand association, and it's sort of like this David and Goliath thing, where you'll have like a smaller entity who can partner with a larger entity by delivering a specific piece of value, and it kind of elevates both.
Yes.
So you do this master class, and do you remember like what your results were? I'm curious, like, do you remember what happened in terms of your list growth? Do you remember like what happened in terms of your ability to acquire customers in the weeks or months later that met you there, or referrals? I'm curious, as you sort of looked back, what some of the results were from something like this. Because I think sometimes people think, I'm going to get thousands of opt-ins and a bunch of customers immediately. And it's not always like that. You know what I mean? That's what I have found. So I'm curious what your experience was.
I always think about, building our business when we're starting off, kind of like rolling a snowball up a mountain, right? You want to get as much snow as possible. And so one of the things that I did was I took screenshots of the chat because people loved it so much that they not only in the chat said that this was the single best masterclass that they've watched all of COVID. Someone DM'd me on LinkedIn and said they have a grad degree in PR, and this was more than they've learned at 2 years at NYU. Like taking those screenshots
Amazing.
and using it as testimonial is going to be so good for you to do what? To pitch to another bigger organization. So that also helped me pitch to another organization that was like, hey, here's one that I just did for I Fund Women. They loved it so much. Here's some testimonials. Here's a social proof. I'm happy to do it for you. And then it just becomes so much easier. So then that while that's going, that's kind of just runs on its own, right? It becomes so much easier. And then you can start focusing on, customer acquisition and having one-on-one chats with whoever did
Yeah.
attend the webinar and express interest. But
Yeah.
don't, but like there's so much gold in just the social proof alone that you can just use it to. And then I was able to pitch and I got paid speaking opportunities at Columbia University.
Amazing. And I agree with you. I do think that there's, because when you think about growth, um, readiness is important. So we'll often set like revenue targets or we'll set goals for ourselves. But there is this piece which is like, you are ready. Is your business ready? Like, does your business actually have the audience, the relationships, the leads that it actually needs in order to hit these revenue goals? And so I do think entrepreneurs would do well when they build their readiness, not just their revenue. They do go together, but one is typically like a lead indicator. And, the strategy that you're talking about definitely was that. Okay. So certainly this masterclass evolved. Your methodology didn't, but as you've already stated, when you pitched it to different types of audiences, you're going to make it relevant, and targeted to them, even though the backbone of what you're teaching, like you're teaching principles and they don't really change,
Yes.
but how they're applied or how they're positioned does. But when you think about sort of that, the backbone of that class, the backbone of that teaching, over the course of the next few years, like how many times have you presented that core teaching to other people's audiences?
Ooh, I would say there was one time I was probably doing it once a week or once every other week. And then that became my signature masterclass for my evergreen webinar funnel. And I didn't live launch at all last year. It was just the recording.
Yeah.
And people got so much out of the recording that they were able to join my PR program with, just from watching that video. So that's what I mean is like if you make a really substantive, masterclass, then people will understand that there's so much value. And I think there's a lot of people, there's an old guard of marketing that was like, you know, don't tell them everything or like, leave them
Mhm.
wanting more. And I absolutely do not agree. I think that's one of the marketing
Me
rules that
too.
I flat out said is BS. If you show them everything, which I pretty much did, um, they're going to feel empowered and they're going to be like, I can do this for myself. What? And they're going to want to take the next step with you. It might not be tomorrow,
Yeah.
it could be next month. So I think the old guard of marketing of like, oh, don't show them everything. Like, no, you absolutely should show as much as you can and make it possible. And so I think we're changing in marketing. I think before it was like selling based on secrecy and complexity. And now people are just so turned off by that. I think the more
Mm,
simplified you can make it, the more demystifying you can make it, the more people trust you. And trust is so much more important now than just authority alone.
yeah. And there's also a piece of gold in what you just shared, which is that so you did the master class to other people's audiences hundreds of times, refining it. And then that's the piece that you turned into an evergreen funnel. Like you had already shared it with, we talked about it, like 5,000 people,
Hmm.
probably, 50 people here, 100 people here, 30 people there, So you're just putting in the work, teaching this in a live way to other people's audiences, seeing what works, seeing how, like making sure, seeing where maybe they didn't understand something, figuring out where you need to shore something up, add more scaffolding. And then at the end of that, you know that you have something that is effective, that people can get value from right away. And then that's the thing that you put on Evergreen. And as you've just shared, you have not you did not live launch in 2024. It was all sending people to an automated Evergreen webinar funnel. Now, what has this, listen, our people they're like, Gloria and Eleanor, this is amazing. I'm loving it. But is there any money in it? You know what I mean? So yes, we want to have, yes, we're all about the readiness, but let's talk about the revenue. So I'm curious, like what can you share in terms of financial impact of this strategy? This specific strategy. What did it yield for you as you sort of look back that made it worthwhile?
So, during COVID, I was new to this digital course model, right? And I had
Yeah.
no idea what a webinar was, what a funnel was. I mean, those were the tough days. So I obviously didn't have the ad spend to be able to, pump the machine. But I made my first, I want to say, $250 million, $250,000 just by doing these master classes alone. Because I
That's
didn't,
amazing.
it was all organic at that point. I didn't spend a
Yeah.
single dollar on any ad. So this
Yeah.
absolutely works. And it was actually absolutely like during a short amount of time too.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
was a
I was
couple
going to
months.
say, because so many of the people that you would have communicated with and taught, they'd come on your list. You know, what we know about most buyers is that of 100 people you attract, like 50 people will probably never buy anything from anyone. Of those 50 that remain, a group is probably going to buy fairly quickly, but then there's another group, it's going to take them time. It could be 2 or 3 years before, and you're just like adding to that audience with every masterclass that you do. So I could talk to you about this all day, but I think the biggest question people probably have is like, oh my gosh, where can I go and see this? So like if people do want to go and see like a version of the masterclass that you've talked about to both see how it worked and see how you structured it, but also learn some of these techniques to start actually pitching organizations themselves, where would they go to find that?
Well, yeah, of course. I will say one thing is that the great thing about masterclasses when you are presenting it to a community is that people are going to be going off in the Slack channel and saying, "I attended Gloria's masterclass. It was so good." So you start to get that community reinforcement. That's the
Yeah.
reason why when you leverage your time, it's a win-win-win across all things. It's a win because you get testimonials. It's a win because they're giving you social proof in the group channel with others. It's a win because then you get to use that as pitching for other things. So that's the reason why I loved doing this masterclass by leveraging other people's communities because there's so much ROI that I got. In terms of watching the masterclass, you can go to Gloria choupr.com/masterclass. I'm also on all the Instagrams, but Gloria choupr.com/masterclass. And you can watch that on demand. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you do with it.
Right. I know. Awesome. So we'll link that to the show notes. I guess the final question that I'll have around this is sort of another very practical one. I know that the question people are going to have is, okay, where do I find these communities?
Mm.
Because sometimes that's where they really get stuck, is coming up with, where do I find the people? Where do I find the people who have communities? Where do I find the organizations, et cetera? So do you have any tips around that, starting to kind of build that list of people to reach out to?
I mean, I think now with the information and like AI and so many Facebook groups, I think if you're asking that, you just haven't really talked to your audience. And a lot of times we're afraid to talk to our audience because we think it's awkward or we're burdening them. But the more you talk to your audience, the more your business will grow. So I actually did a
Mhm.
New Year survey this year of finding out exactly where they are in their business. And I do this every year. So I encourage you, even if it's someone maybe in the DMs with you who's somewhat of your ideal customer avatar, ask them, what are the podcasts that you listen to, right? Because pitching for podcasts is another powerful way to leverage someone's audience and it has great ROI. What are some of the communities, whether paid or unpaid? Are there any Slack channels that you join? Are there any Facebook groups? And once they give you the name of one, you can start going down the rabbit hole of seeing, because like Facebook gives you suggestions, iTunes gives you suggestions. You just need somewhere to start. And so it becomes very easy, but it all starts with asking just 3 to 5 people those questions. The podcasts that you
Mm.
listen to, the paid and unpaid communities that you are a part of, whether or not you are part of any Slack channels or any kind of, Facebook groups. That's a great way to get started.
Oh, that's super practical. Guys, go back and listen to this and like take some notes of all kind of the very practical, I think, tips and insights that you've shared. Those are, killer questions. I appreciate you so much. So we've talked about gloriachoupr.com/masterclass. Where else should people go to connect with you to just kind of be in your world?
So I'm very open and honest and raw on my Instagram. So I'm at Gloria
And
Chow.
funny,
Yeah.
also very funny and entertaining. The
I
queen of memes, the queen of
A lot
memes.
of memes. And so I'm at Gloria Chow, Gloria. Choupr. And I share about my healing generational trauma with my mom. I share about, I share funny memes with Cardi B. So it's like, it's a mix of all sorts of stuff. You're in for a ride. And you can honestly, happy to like DM me. And if you DM me the word pitch, I will give you another pitching freebie so that you can take the next step in your pitching journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much.